Hello and welcome back to my studio. It's been a long time since I've done something on painting, as I launched our new YouTube channel, done some Disney and Starbucks, but not so much on the painting. And so I wanted to share some of my recent journey with you, particularly since I moved into this new studio space. It's my painting studio, it's my Starbucks collection, it's my YouTube studio. It's just sort of my active, creative room. In any case, had some great comments on some recent studio space video that I did, and I'll have the link to that on the screen so you can go and see how I created this space, as well as an older review that I painted in Hawaii, as I did a review of a plein air box, the Gorilla Box, and I'll put that link as well. And so some encouraging comments, people asking to see more of my art journey. In these recent months of sort of lockdown, shelter-in-place, pandemic, I just have not gone out a whole lot and done as much plein air painting. And so I decided over the course of this past year to do a number of online courses. Earlier in 2020 to mid-2020, I did a lot of Saturday morning workshops with an artist called Gary Tucker. And now I'm doing a 4-month mentorship course with Breanne Brown. Both of their links are in the description so that you could check out those two artists. Gary has a lot of YouTube videos that he's made. Breanne not as much, but she does some workshops and the like. I'm loving my current workshop, and even though this mentorship program really does do a lot of review of stuff that I kind of felt I knew already, and how easy it is to think you already know things. But I'm a relatively new artist, and as I build what they call muscle memory, right? They do this in exercise as well. We have to keep going over the basics over and over until it becomes ingrained in our behavior and our thought process. So the first part of this workshop, again, 4 months, focused on just drawing and learning how to do line drawings and now all of a sudden I'm going to draw blank, but line drawings and sort of freehand, oh man, I wish I remembered. I probably should edit this out, but I might not. In any case, I'm just going to go on. The point is that you do some drawing, not trying to, you just sort of don't pick up the pencil and you just sort of go through and make it all connect as one. And that's kind of challenging. And then there were different methods to get, to match lines and shapes and perspective and all that sort of stuff. Well, I've always liked to draw, so I kind of felt like, well, the first month, whatever. But you know what? Things start to click in, and then you realize, okay, yeah, I need to do this. Well, then the next month was focused on values, light and dark. And really art, photography, painting, all of it is about how you represent those value shades. Do you do, a wide value shade, considering there's 10 values, let's say, from bright white to deepest black, and you've got all these grays in between, or you do a high contrast where it's just black and white with no grays. And so learning to connect the values, and in painting we talk about connecting the shapes. Don't think about I'm painting a tree and I'm painting a barn and I'm painting a person and I'm painting a cow. We are connecting shapes so that there's a unity in the painting and the drawing. And so doing that by values is really important. The third month has been on color and learning to recognize that the shades of colors, from their purest saturation and vibrancy of color down to their they're grayed out, neutralized shades, or brightened up into their whiter tints. Taking those color ranges and yet still managing to keep our connection of values is a huge process for an artist, and certainly one that I struggle with, as I know a lot of you do as well if you paint and the like. Because again, it's easier to paint our little objects. But we want to create a unified approach. Next month, we're focusing on composition, but I felt like I wanted to share my journey so far. And so let me start with the drawing. She gave us subjects for the first couple weeks that she provided, and then the last week, we chose our own option. Some of the students chose a different option every month or every week. I chose to do one image all the way through. And so you'll get to see my journey and growth on that as well. But let me start with the one she presented and talk about some of these ideas. So she gave us this image of a barn behind some trees with a mountain range. And sorry, I'll pop up the photograph for you so you can see what the source photo looked like. But then we were supposed to create a value drawing where we just took it darks, lights, maybe only reduced it down to 2, 3, 4 values, where we weren't trying to make the drawing look good. We were just trying to cement in our brain how we saw the image. And so then this is the drawing, and obviously it's not a very good drawing, but you can see that down in front is a wagon that tends to be dark, and you're led into the picture. There's a barn here that's sort of a light and medium value, but with a dark value inside the door. There's some trees here, and clearly some of the trees have some very dark sections. And in the background, there's the beginning of a mountain range capped with some snow, and then a darker tree line. And so the idea is that we are connecting these shapes so that there is a unity in the approach. And so that was my initial drawing. Then I did a value painting, and this is where we begin to flesh it out. By using only one tint, this is a dark pigment that's been watered down to make the light, and more pure pigment to make the darks. And you can see how, again, we begin to connect the shapes, even though it's one color, by creating some negative space of some lights next to darks. You see some extreme contrast, and you see some calligraphic lines that I put in there. But you really begin to get a sense of what this is. And you're not trying to truly identify and everything look very representational and exact. What is that? Seriously, what is that? Well, as you look at it, you think, oh, that's just a piece of equipment out there. That's probably another wagon or something. And yeah, that's probably what I think it is. But if you look really close, I didn't paint any of that detail, did I? But you get the sense as the shapes connect back there that there's some farm equipment back there and there's stuff there. You don't have to have it all super detailed, but you get the idea of what it is. Well, then we moved into our color month, and this was cool because I know that you don't have to paint matchy. Okay, that's a red barn, and that's a green tree, and there's some yellow flowers, and you're trying to match that yellow and that green and that red. You can change it up. That's what art is, right? It's not a color photograph. It is a painting where you're interpreting what you see. And so she gave us the exercise to take that same painting, but to choose different color schemes from our palette of our paint colors. And so choose some. If you understand the color wheel, you've got, the red, yellow, blue, and then you've got, between red and yellow, you've got orange, and between blue and yellow, you've got green, and, so whatever. Take those shades. So here I just took 2 colors. It's called the opposite of the color wheel. I took 2 colors, I'm not a big fan of those two colors together, but I created, using just two colors, you create all those various shades as they blend. This one I took three colors. It's what they call a triad. There is a version of red, a version of blue, and a version of yellow. And look at all the different shades and the mood you can create. And that's what color does. Value creates the contrast and the identifying of the linked shapes, but the color creates the mood that you want to create with that. You can have a mid-tone green and a mid-tone red and a mid-tone gray, but that's all a connected shape in terms of value. And then this one is what they call a split triad. So there's at the color wheel there is, the blue, but then there is, a version of I used orange. I'm sorry, here I'm babbling. Orange, and then across that I used two variations of a blue on the color wheel to create this split version. I love the warmth of this one, but I was drawn in for my final painting of this. I was drawn to this one because I loved the cool, snowy winter's twilight feel to it. So these are not actually detailed out paintings. These are just little studies to get a sense of how the colors blend. And this is part of the process that you do when you're creating paintings. When you're out in the field doing a plein air painting, you're just out there and you paint. But when you're wanting to do some studio work, you go through this process of drawing, of value, of color, thoughts. Maybe you don't literally do this every time, but your brain begins to, as you create that memory muscle, your brain begins to behave this way. Well, let me show you the final painting I did of it. And there's some weaknesses and stuff, but I love the way this came out. Again, you can't really tell what that is, but it's linked in with some darks back there. The blue blended with the brownish gray. The background here of the snow and the shadows from the wagon and the tree. I'm not saying I did the best job in this. I'm just saying I like the creative process that was created here, and the misty background as the hills just sort of fade off in the distance. I think you're drawn up this road to this barn, and you just like this feel. I'd like to hang out here for an afternoon, right? Well, we chose as well our own subject matter, and a few years ago, well, actually a number of years ago now, I've been to Russia a number of times in the winter with my church doing some winter camps for children at an orphanage. We'd go there and, we'd fly into Moscow and fly out of Moscow. And so we'd spend a day or two on either end of our activity at the orphanage. We'd spend in Moscow. And, of course, I'm born in the 60s, but my years of coming into adulthood were in the 80s. And so hanging out in Red Square was a pretty profound experience. So I took obviously a lot of photos, and one of them I'm flashing up on the screen right now. It's just beautiful around the corner of Red Square and the around the corner. One of these is around the corner of Red Square and of one of the corners of the Kremlin. Just a really neat view to me to see that incredible green-capped tower with the star, the communist star, and the sunlight shining down the path. So that's the photograph that I chose to do all along. And I chose it for me to challenge some of my areas that I knew I needed to grow. I wanted to work with angles and perspective of building. I wanted to work with people. I don't generally like to paint figures, and I knew I need to grow in that. So rather than just choose a landscape that didn't have any, I just dove head on into something that I thought would be hard. And as a painting, as a photograph, it is difficult because it's very busy with all the trees silhouetted and the people, the crowds, and of course then all the angles of the building. And how do you represent that in a way that doesn't just look like a photograph? Because my desire is to be a more of a loose style painter, and yet I didn't want to be so loose that you lost some of the sharpness of the Kremlin. You know, there is a rigid and a sharpness to that idea that I wanted to bring out. And so I did my initial drawing. Here's my initial line drawing. Just to get the sense of shape and layout of how I was going to do it. I put in a lot of the people. I kind of drew it exactly as I saw it. There's not really a whole lot of shading, some on the people, but really it's just to show the angles, the going back and the perspective. I love street lamps, and this one in particular is just beautiful with the tower, so you're drawn up and you're drawn back. I just think it's a great composition, doing that. And then we had to do a value drawing. So now I did and it's just small, you can see. It's just a quarter size piece of paper. But I had to make sure that I knew where are the darkest darks, where are the lightest lights, and begin to think how I was going to spread that out. Value drawings, again, only 2 to 3 values. I'm not looking to do the whole range of grays, just get a sense of where dark is, where light is, where mid is. And then I did the value painting. And so here, again, just one pigment, watered down for the lights, darkened up here pigment for the darks, to get a sense of what it is. This is not a final painting, obviously, so there's going to be some compositional problems. I got these people too close to the pole. It looks like they're walking right into it, right? But in my critiques with Brienne, she highlighted a few things. I left this too light. Your eye is drawn the wrong way. The snow here is behind a dark wall, but yet it's too bright. So just some good critiques of changing the value up. And then this month we are doing the color painting, and I'm pleased with this. And let me just share a little bit of, as I was painting it, I was feeling like, oh no, I'm ruining it, because I'd put a month of really a lot of stress into creating this painting. I knew it was coming, and I was building myself up, and I psyched myself out a little bit. And which is silly, because it's watercolor. I can redo it easy enough. It's not like I put in 25 hours on an oil painting. It took me a while. This painting took me longer than just about any other painting I've ever done. A number of hours, actually. But nonetheless, it's just paper and water and some pigment. I can redo it. So I didn't need to psych myself up so much, but I did. And I felt as I was painting it, oh no, every time I put pigment on, I was ruining it. And then, finally I stepped away for a few hours, and when I came back, I'm like, I think I did okay. And there's some areas that I worked on still to improve, but let me show you. I'm going to show you the first version that I submitted, and I put it out to our class for our critique. And so here it is, as you're seeing it on screen. And I liked it in general. It's a little stiffer still, even though there's a sense of some looseness. Obviously, the branches are very calligraphic, and the people are not so representational. But it still has a little bit of, to my taste, maybe a little bit of stiffness. That may be, though, me. And here's the thing, we're always our worst critic, right? Because I'm getting a lot of really good feedback from folks. And even Brienne gave some good feedback. But nonetheless, I think it's beautiful. I just obviously am going to see my own flaws in it, right? But we had our review today, and so I probably should show you side by side. But I'm gonna hold this is the same painting, but with some of the changes that were suggested. You can't always in watercolor make the changes suggested, but thankfully the ones that were suggested, I was able to do after the fact. And I'm gonna hold it here, and then over my face, I'm gonna pop up the other version of it so that you can see me point at this one. Okay. Here, look at this wall here on the other painting, the first version. As it went down the path to the sunlight, it still kept the same intensity. And so the suggestion is that I gradiate this down. So it has actually a sense of more brightness, more sunlight, but less intensity of color. Another suggestion is that this tree, you can see on the other one, is actually the corner of the building as well. And in reality, and I don't know from the photograph, I didn't pay that much attention, trees may be on the corner, but that's not the best composition. And so that's the freedom we have in painting, is we can move things around. So I was able in this painting actually just to paint some dark color and change where my corner was. And so actually it does read a lot better here. And so that's great. Additionally, I didn't have this tower dark enough on the shady side. So I added a little more deep color to the green so that you can truly tell that where the sunlight's coming from. Another change that was suggested was that this tree branch, I kind of just sort of stopped here on that other one, but it was suggested that we bring it down in here, connect the shape. You don't need a little stubby branch like that on this giant tree. Same with this one, bring it down and interlace them. It's okay. I don't know why I didn't do that in the first place. I think I was getting a little scared of all this spider webbing. But as you saw in the original source photo, that's kind of what's there. And that's what's magical actually about that, is the trees in winter, the starkness, the sharpness of the Kremlin. I just sort of had this view, again, my mind going there in the 80s, thinking politically, Kremlin, Russia, And what I love about this is my experience in Russia is that the people are lovely. Governments are governments and our fears of governments, but at the heart, people are people. And that's why I loved seeing just the people walking around their city, enjoying their beautiful city. And Moscow is a beautiful city. And so you kind of get that sense. And then I appreciated all the way I was able to keep the white on the snow and the like. The other change is to break up some of the rhythm of the trees, is that I had them too soldier-like. And even though in landscape, they may have actually planted trees in very equidistant ways, but in painting, in representational art and composition, you want to sort of break that up a bit if you can, unless there's a reason that you're trying to create that rigidity. But it just reads better. And so those were the few changes that that were suggested. Oh, and I added some better shadows. Even though in the source pic there actually aren't quite the shadows, but because of the way I painted this all brighter. The sun's a little higher, and it's more intense than the original picture. We brought in that it needed more shadowing of the figures. I took out, not since on my first version, I took out people here from the source photo. I felt they weren't necessary. It just was too busy here. So I just have the few groups of people, but it's this couple here that really draws your eye. And so I'm actually very pleased with this painting. Is it my best? I don't know. Will it be my best? I hope not. I hope I improve. But I'm very satisfied with what I've done here. Along the way, I got very scared and very upset at myself. But I'm satisfied with what I've done. I love this class, and I have, again, one more month, and I hope that it goes well and I learn a little bit more to add to my arsenal of growing in my painting and artistic ability. And I hope you've enjoyed kind of going through this journey with me. If you are a watercolorist, and I would encourage you to take some courses from Brienne. She's a great teacher. And if you're not a watercolorist, or you don't want to take the course, I hope you've learned something from my learning at this course, and that has encouraged you. Please subscribe to my channel. I know it's kind of all over the map of Starbucks and Disney, as well as my painting and other things that I post. But I hope that you'll go along this creative journey with me and my wife, and subscribe to our channel, and maybe buy me a cup of coffee as well, just to say, hey, good job. We want to keep bringing these videos here. That would be appreciated. You can buy just a one-time cup of coffee, or you can become a sponsor through that link of Buy Me a Cup of Coffee as well. And then, of course, like and subscribe and all of those things that every YouTube content creator says. I would really appreciate your involvement. Have a great time, and if you're an artist, continue to grow and expand, and maybe go back to some basics just to remind yourself. And then leave some comments and let me know what you thought about my journey and how it's impacted your journey as an artist. That would be great. And if you've stuck it out this long, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.